Well, here we go. Summer has drawn to a close, and on September 15th, our politicians go back to work. What will they get up to when they get back? Well, joining me to my right, Anthony Furey and Paul McCucci across from me for a quick discussion on what we think the priorities of the Prime Minister will be as we head back to Parliament.
Yeah, it's got to be budget, Mike. I think really at this point, he's dodged the bullet this long. He hasn't given us a budget. We haven't even seen the financials, the annual report for 2025. So in my mind, right, the first priority is for him to lay it out and tell us exactly where he's going to, put the monies. But where is he going to put the budget? I guess the priority is what you're asking. He's got a myriad of issues, right? Security, crime, our legal system blowing up in the middle of it, politics, defense, energy, is he going to do any projects? So, your guess is mine.
It's interesting over the past few episodes, all of those topics have kind of been hit with what will Carney do? What are your thoughts, Anthony? How does he arrive back into Parliament, or I guess really into Parliament for the first time, if it was to be an honest statement?
Well, Mike, that's what I was going to pick up on, because the most noteworthy thing right now is that it's happening. We had this guy become Prime Minister, didn't know too much about him, didn't know exactly what he'd be up to. And then he calls an election right away, which is fine because he needed to get a mandate, right, because he'd only just come back to Canada from wherever it was in the world that he was hanging out the past number of years. So he says,
that's a great point.
He says, I got to get the people's mandate. He wins the leadership. He's Prime Minister for a day or two and says, okay, we're going to call an election. And he does it. There had not been any sittings of Parliament since then. We have not had them sit. So these new MPs, all the new MPs elected, they've not been in the House of Commons yet. They've gone and they've sort of sworn in and they've done the oath of office stuff and gotten a little photo op there, getting introduced. But there hasn't been really a long period of sitting. You look at the calendar, it starts in September. They're going to get a bunch of weeks in until they break for Christmas. So this is the first real chunk of time where, to Paul's point, you're going to get to tackle some of the big issues that ail the country. What is it going to be in terms of an approach? And then there's another individual who's now back in the pack. He was kind of kicked out of the House for a bit. We thought initially he was going to be the Prime Minister and he would be in charge, Pierre Poilievre. Things did not turn out the way that he had hoped, and he was even removed from his own seat. Now he's won that election in Alberta, so he's coming back, and he's going to be really champing at the bit to go and take a shot at Mark Carney and just really take him down a peg and so forth. But how's that going to unfold as well? So we have policy and we have personality, and those are going to be the two big driving things from September to December to set the tone of what are they going to deal with and how are they going to conduct themselves.
It's not a huge majority really that's running the country at the moment. And so what happens, I think, once things get back to work in Ottawa, there's going to be a lot of dissent, a lot of volleying, and that makes me wonder what kind of challenges the Prime Minister is going to have up against a pretty full House, only basically half of which is his.
Yeah, well, that's, and Anthony was kind of on it right from the top. The NDP, right? So we don't have a leader. And it was kind of funny. They waited the summer. And, this week they said, well, now we need a leader, right? So,
it's like, well, yeah,
we took the summer off, right? They knew their predicament. They waited the whole summer.
They saw Jagmeet Singh working out, doing his hair, tying his turban every day, and still they didn't realize he's gone. He's retired.
So then they sent this letter out to everyone saying, hey, if you want to be the leader, here's what you need to do, right? And who you need to be. And that was kind of odd. And so now, we're going back into the House of Commons, short that party for sure, because we knew they had a crumbling when they fell apart during the election. But the interesting part of it too is, in this, do you actually pull a Trudeau and do you go and try to reach an agreement with another party, like the Liberals did before, and will that fly? That's the other thing you got to think about, the strategy. Is there any strategy? Is the strategy gone? Like, can you pull something like that? Will Canadians be up for it, given the general election and the total vote count being so even in the country? Is anyone up for that anymore? And I think the awareness that came from this election probably negates the ability to do some of that. I think before, when the Trudeau government was in, probably no one was paying attention. No one realized we were sort of in this weird dire straits position that we are now. So they weren't paying attention. So you could do some of that. You could reach agreements. No one contested that. No one thought much of it. It kind of talked about it a little bit. Is that even legal? Did anyone really, hit on it? And they didn't. But now I think the awareness is really heightened.
Do you think that the scrutiny will change? Do you think there's enough scrutiny to make change, in this government?
I don't know if I share Paul's optimism fully that people are in the game right now. I mean, I think he's right that people are very much more engaged in some respects, but I think you can still pull these maneuvers off if they want to. It was funny. They called the coalition the Supply and Confidence Agreement. And then there was a time where, I had the experience where if you'd write a column and you'd say coalition, they'd send you an email, oh, we have a correction. It's not a coalition. I'll call it whatever I want to call it. It's a supply and confidence agreement, as if it's like a legal thing that exists.
No, we're going to use the real name
I'll say whatever I want to say about this this unholy alliance that you've put together. But then the question is the NDP going to want to pal around with Carney that much more? Because Justin Trudeau was a pretty left-wing guy, so there was not much of a need for the NDP. He was the NDP, and then Jagmeet Singh and him were fellow travelers on things. Carney, he's obviously not as conservative as blue blood conservatives would like him to be, but he's also Mr. Wall Street, Mr. Central Banker, Mr.
That's
Brookfield,
a good point.
Which is not a very NDP thing.
No.
So whether the public, some will buy it, some won't. Will the NDP buy it?
I wonder that.
And when you're in a leadership race is when you get most extreme, I think, core to your roots and principles, because the people who run, they run not for the general electorate, but to fire up the base. The base is not interested in Mr. Brookfield. I think it may be tough. I mean, to your point, who's going to be buying it? And it's a different mix of people. So I'm not so sure. But he's got to pass the legislation. I mean, what ways he's at? I know 169 or something. He needs 3 or 4 votes. He'll get the votes on most of the major bills. The question is, are they formal alliances? How does it happen?
I'd be curious to see who is, and I don't even know who is the most likely candidate to take over the NDP. And that's an indicator in itself that party has very little play in this country, if at all, certainly in this province. I've got to ask.
It's kind of an irrelevant question to your point. Like, who's going to run the NDP? Who cares?
Doesn't matter, right? So, okay, so now let me ask you this. Paul, I know your opinion on this. The economy is something that you keep an eye on. You're a little touchy about budget and, in fact, accountability. So, do you think that Carney arrives with accountability on the Trudeau spending previously? And do you think we get a really clear understanding of what we're spending moving forward?
Ooh, so far, no, right? I think he hasn't shown that he wants to participate in that active discussion. Yeah. I think he's going to have to, of course, he's got to get a budget on the table. He's got to figure it out. I think he's got to, number one, he's got to go through, first of all, what is he going to do with the military, security, defense? I think he's got all those issues he's got to tackle. He went out and made a big promise right off the hop. He got over into NATO. He said 5%. We had that, Mike and I had a great discussion with the Fraser Institute people, and they basically said it was non-binding. So now he has to kind of, is he a man of his word? Is he not? Is he going to hedge that? How's he going to hedge it? So he's got to figure that piece out. That's a huge piece.
Well, I'm pretty sure he's going to hand the money over. He spent the summer going around saying that Ukraine's battle is our battle, their war is our war, and he seemed to be dropping off money wherever he could to make an impression globally.
I know, but can you afford it? That's the problem right now, right? The issue's becoming, you've seen the GDP drop that we've seen in the last quarter. Now, I know it's, I'm going to talk about it later today, but I know that's kind of smoothed over from previous periods, but it does show some indication that we're actually seeing some softening with the unemployment numbers. So, and so how does he deal with that? I think he's got to tackle that, the defense issue. He's got the budget issue with costs and his government growth that he's seen over the years and expansion of government. making up, the biggest part of his government expenditure is government. So he's got to deal with that issue. And then, quite frankly, he's got major projects that he hasn't tackled. So right now, if he's going to tackle some pipelines, if he's going to tackle any of the major projects that we need in the country right now, he's got to put aside some money and budget for it.
He's a big-time banker, Anthony. What do you think his strategy is? Do you think he has one that
print money? That's what the big-time bankers do.
I guess that is true, and I think that might be part of the solution presented to us. Over the next few months, I would imagine that we hear that to bolster our economy and get things moving, that we're going to end up printing more money.
But let's tie in, what Paul was saying, and you sort of opened with a bit of a joke. Paul's a bit touchy about needing the budget and so forth, and to think we should only have to get that perspective from someone who's an expert in accounting. I think we should all be very touchy about the budget, particularly when you've got a bankers. Oh, don't worry. I'm the banker. I've got it all under control. Mm-hmm. Great. So you're going to be the one on day one who gives us a full ledger sheet, best budget we've ever had, right? Oh no. Instead, we don't even get a budget from this guy. Shouldn't he be the one who's most excelling at delivering what you're talking about?
Sure. Yeah. No. Former accountant. I know that's my wheelhouse. And we can talk about printing money. So let's talk about that, for a minute, because that's another issue, right? We can't go, and we've talked about it previously, we can't go our borrowing capability is going to go down. So we get that, right? So as our borrowing capability goes down, we're going to be printing money. But printing money has ramifications, and we're seeing it right now. I don't know if you guys have picked up in the last couple of days, but France is becoming a nightmare.
Yeah,
right?
They're on the brink of bankruptcy overall. And by the way, with all the same markers we have as a country leading in.
High immigration, high unemployment, printing money, right? Housing issues. So all these symptoms of these countries that went for the high immigration, increased immigration coming out of COVID to actually make up for your labor force, to increase your economy, are now showing the cracks of a strategy that didn't work, right? It was a faulty strategy. It didn't, and we can go into it. There's a big, long show on immigration, but quite frankly, that immigration strategy only worked a few times in the history of the world, where mass immigration worked really well, and it has to be lined up perfectly, or it is horrifically bad for countries and the world. So it's shown throughout times that that's the case, and he's facing that now. He's facing the cracks in immigration. So, but then the other issue is...
But we're seeing that there's a plan on track to bring in what will total 500,000 asylum-seeking immigrants. And if that number is correct, I'm not sure I don't think that it's already working, frankly. I think that we have so many disappointed immigrants here. We have so many ramifications on how fast it happened. And yet we still see that line headed toward a higher number.
Well, because we have to make the case that we need housing, right? So if you stop immigration, you can't keep saying I need housing because you don't have immigration. So it's a slippery slope, right? You're increasing the inflow in the borders to actually create development with developers and housing. So I understand the philosophy. The philosophy is faulty because, quite frankly, the people you're bringing in are not creating the economy to buy those houses, right? So now you're down to rental properties.
How can asylum seekers have the kind of cash required to be in the housing market and make a difference?
But again, back in the 40s and the 50s, when we saw people coming in from Europe who had skilled trades, quite frankly, they were people who could land on their feet quickly. They could make income. In a few years, they were in the mortgage world and they were moving, right? That's not the immigrant we're seeing now. So unfortunately, most of those people have kind of passed, and the people we're seeing now are mostly unskilled workers who we have to train when they get there, that have a longer curve to get up that curve to get into that, right? So, but he's got to, again, we can go into the depth of it, but the issue is that he's got to figure out that immigration strategy to tie to his budget, and that budget has to tie to housing, which then if housing slows down, the housing bubble pops, is on the horizon. The housing minister today in Toronto was talking basically about the condo bubble ended bursting right now.
Yeah.
So he knows the condo bubble is going to burst relatively soon. It's bursting now. So how do you adjust for that? What happens when that recorrects? It's a big issue.
And not just in one province, but really it's a national epidemic of condo crash. Prices across the country soared. Americans laugh at us constantly about what we pay, what we get for $1 million in Canada as opposed to what you get for $1 million just about anywhere in America. Anthony, crime seems to be on the increase. I'm not imagining this. I just had a long weekend where every single time that I saw the news, it was more horrific than the last time I checked. This has to be a focus of our government when we get back. What do you think is going to happen on that front?
Well, it may not be. And that's the wild thing, because to your point, Labor Day long weekend, families get together. What do they talk about? They talk about some of the big things that are in the news and budget, personal budget, personal spending, the economy. They're talking about that. How can I pay my bills? So that's a big focus. And then number two will be, wow, did you see the story of that father in Vaughan who was killed at point blank range as his children watched? Wow, did you hear about that guy in Welland who'd just gotten out of jail on bail or whatnot, shouldn't have even been out there, and then he did things. And I know, we're both longtime broadcasters. When there's a crime that's done, when you even feel like, can I summarize this on air? Is this against like broadcasting standards? The crime that's committed in Welland, the sexual violation of the minor and everything. You're like,
how can I even present?
I don't even feel as a human being comfortable talking it, recapping this, and that's what everyone's talking about now. But then you have Minister Sean Fraser kind of making light of it. Mark Carney, I don't think he's going to want to talk about crime because it factors into so many of the big picture issues that Paul's alluding to in terms of how we're structuring, obviously the justice system, but economic matters, immigration, and so forth.
Well, the justice system, you touch on that. Many of these crimes are being committed by people who have basically been released that would normally be in jail in any normal society, and they're out there reoffending.
And yet we've had some weird rulings recently that have come out where the judges have said, I've got to give the person a lighter sentence because if I give them a higher sentence, it affects their immigration status and they might risk deportation. And you're like, what?
How?
And you're like, well, okay,
good.
That shouldn't that be what happens? If you violate, and I don't think that guy was an immigrant or a PR, but you do sexual violation of a child. Okay, and you're deported? I'm kind of okay with that. I'm okay with that too. But then a judge is saying, well, hold on, we got to do a ruling here such that this guy isn't kicked out of the country because what? Because we care about this guy? No, but we don't care about the kid? What's happening here?
But let's then we jump to let's put in the castle laws, right? Which I get. I understand why people are saying that, but quite frankly, now we've gone down the road and now we're trying to actually take care of the problem. So not the cause anymore. We're now at the problem. So now we're implementing castle laws to arm people to actually protect their castles, right? So we're saying it's okay, which I get, and I understand. But that's a whole slippery slope, right?
Yeah, that's a different society.
It's a different, and I lived there. And I was in the States for 12 years. I understand what open carry, castle, protect your property is all about. It's not as simple. I think we're having a lot of people jump into action to try to make these brave statements. It's not as simple as I just start with the castle law, right? Because then it expands. Where does my castle end and stop? Does it stop at my border of my property? Does it stop at my door? Does it stop when they're in my door? What can I do? How far can I go?
Gun
what
laws
can
would
I
have
carry?
To completely change.
Gun laws. Then the next step after that, if it doesn't knock it down, is okay, now is it open carry? Is it concealed carry? Then that's a whole other thing. And, I've been there. I've been in states with open carry where I'm having dinner where people are putting their 6-shooters on the table. I'm been in states where, quite frankly, there's been mass shootings going on where I'm having dinner and everyone's hiding under the table and pulling their weapons. So that's a whole other can of worms that we're starting to open.
For.
Yeah.
But how can we meet in the middle on it? Because I think from a father's perspective, as someone in the GTA, I want to know, middle of the night, somebody just gets in the house, they run up the stairs to the floor that the kids are on. And I want to think this guy's run up the stairs, he's got some knife or whatever that I can just kick him. And then let's say he falls down the stairs. Let's say he breaks his neck and he's paralyzed, or he dies, or he doesn't die. But I want to think people go, okay, well, the guy was run up the stairs to kill the kids. So he kicked him down the stairs. All right. Like, I wasn't trying to kill the guy, but he died. So what? I feel like in other times I would go, yeah, whatever. I got to do what I got to do. Now I'm even thinking, gee, I got to protect the kids in the short term.
Protect this guy.
Well, no, but I got to protect the kids in the short term, but I've also got to protect them in the long term.
Right.
Because if I kick them down the stairs, I'm going to jail, and I'm the breadwinner. So if I go to jail, I'm not making money. The kids are going to be destitute. I'm like, how do I manage this? Maybe do I just tickle the guy? Like, what do I do? Do I just do I wrestle?
I'll write that down.
Like, there's got to be, because that's what I think.
Invader.
Well, that's what people are thinking right now. Like, you have to do a calculation in your head in the moment when you've done nothing wrong, but you're trying to figure out, like, what's the middle ground here?
I get it, and I'm totally with you. I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, why are we here now? So, we weren't here, grew up here, right? We all did. Never had these issues.
Now, if you heard of a weapons incident when I was a kid, it was a province-wide, it was front page, it was a big deal, it was on television. It's interesting, this weekend I was following up on a social media post about a double break-in in 1 week in Oakville, Ontario. This poor family got invaded twice in 1 week.
Right.
And I could not for the life of me find that anywhere in the regular news.
So, okay, and I get you. I think the question, and we don't have to get into all the details of it, but the question I think we got to ask ourselves is, how do we get here? And if we can't get out of here, so in other words, if we can't go and make this better and put some laws in place and enforcement and prisons and incarcerations, then we are at the castle law. So,
but then I point out, you can't be there because there's so many steps to being prepared to have castle law. The laws have to change. The weapons laws have to change. The perception of people has to change. Oh my goodness. Could you imagine turning that around in this nation? It would be so difficult.
But then what you get then is vigilante justice.
Exactly.
People don't believe in the justice system. So we don't have castle law, but people go, well, I'm still going to do open carry because the police don't come when you call them, and the bad guys have rights. So I got to do what I got to do to protect my family. And I think that's where, it's not happening yet, but that's where people's headspace goes.
The decline of society, once that happens, by the way, by definition, if you look at society over the span of history, society starts to fall when they don't feel protected by their police force and their government, their military.
Case in point, National Guard comes into the nation's capital, right?
Yeah.
So, but those are all, again, nice to haves. And I hate to go back to budgeting again, but, crime is an interesting one, because if we're going to put money into it, money has to come from somewhere else now. There's no, again, we can print money. We thought we just started down that path. But then inflation, do we become Venezuela at some point? We talked about France running into a problem now. They were ahead of us on the debt curve per population. France, quite frankly, has a higher GDP per capita, higher GDP total, and higher PPP GDP. So, quite frankly, as a producing country, it is higher and more productive than us. And it's hitting this curve that's not good right now. So if you look at that, you look at these countries that have just kept printing money, you have to pick programs now. Whatever you do in this budget, whatever you do in your priorities coming forward, it has to produce GDP. Like, whatever your projects are, they have to be profitable, productive, and produce something. Because if you make the mistake and go down the wrong curve and do a bunch of projects that have no outcome, that'll be the end of, you will shift into that gear and be one of those countries that that they're coming to bail out, right?
One of the other areas that I think we have all felt a little duped on, and I think the carbon tax was the sort of tipping point on that. They took it away. But it does make me think we need to do something on a resource level. We are number 4 on the list of most oil-rich countries on Earth. We have some of the most valuable minerals that are safely mined. We have natural gas and all of these resources that make me wonder why we pay so much for gas. And with this kind of oil, number 4 in the world.
Yeah.
that our taxes are so high, that our inflation is so bad, and that so many people are unhoused.
Just was in Delaware on the weekend, right? And they're paying $3.19 a gallon, right? And
80 cents a liter, roughly, or what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, there you are. It's crazy, and we're sending our crude to them. They're refining and sending it back to us,
right.
And we're paying. It's going down to Montana and being shipped back. So it goes.
We're paying the freight both ways.
Yeah, Alberta, Montana, and back to us, and we're paying more. It makes no sense. And we're talking about printing money, right? Soft lumber, all the minerals, gas, all the things that we produce in this country, all the things that we're really good at, right? How about lowering them and creating a lower cost base resource-wise? We can keep our labor rates the same. There's nothing wrong. Like right now, our labor rates are not what's killing the country. I know we've had lots of union strife in the country this year, which has been an indicator of unhappiness. Yeah. But quite frankly, we need to look at our resource allocation and our usage of resources and our costing of resources. Like why are we so hell-bent on creating massive increases in resource costs for our citizens when we could be benefiting? So
that's my question: is how do we not turn these resources on ourselves?
Yeah. I think we looked at, what do they pay for gas in China?
Oh, it's
80 cents a liter.
Yeah, it was pretty much.
It's like 80 cents a liter. They've realized that they got to keep their resource costs low, because then they can actually produce products at a reasonable price.
Moves more product, makes cheaper manufacturing.
More competitive globally. Yeah. So rather than going and, we can go to other countries and we can say, take our resources and we'll let you produce our submarines. But quite frankly, that's not the solution, right? We don't need to produce major military weapons in other countries. We produce them here. We have the steel, we have the materials to produce them. We have the know-how, we have the people and the skills. And then we actually use our resources at a reasonable cost to build things.
Almost 50% of Canadians feel that we've been abandoned on healthcare almost entirely. The dissatisfaction rate that people feel about our healthcare in this country is worse than I've ever seen it. It was something that we were proud of when I was growing up, that we had free healthcare and that it was good and that everybody got access. What is this government going to do about our healthcare?
Well, the challenge is when you looked at the budget. So when we scrubbed the budgets and we scrubbed the annual reports from 2024, our spending on healthcare is up there. Like we're in the top 5 of the world as far as per capita.
Why are wait times so long? Why does it take forever to get an MRI? Why are people dying of diseases that could have been early detected and handled?
I did a podcast yesterday, and the gentleman, it was on a criminal issue, and he just says, we do not do a good job of prosecuting white collar fraud. We do not do a good job of efficiently running our healthcare. It's an efficiency issue. We have to be better at running our public services and more efficient, and we just don't do a good job at it. We don't.
More accountability, more reaction.
Exactly. That's really what it is.
It doesn't feel like it's a money issue ever with our healthcare, to be honest with you. We seem to make it a priority, as you point out in the budget.
Yeah.
It's
we had no problem racking up. I think, the Canadian Federation of Taxpayers, he was great when I met with Franca. He said, listen, we spend $50 billion on interest payments on our debt right now. If we could just reduce that, we could, by $5 billion, we could be producing 5 hospitals a year.
I'm starting to detect a theme off of Paul. Do you detect that theme, Anthony? Money does seem to be the problem. We seem to put ourselves into financial situations like we are a major global player when we're really a pretty tiny country overall in the grand scheme of things. Yes, everybody does pretty well here by comparison, but how do you guys feel that we are going to do on the international front? What are international affairs going to look like over the next 3 to 5 years?
We tell ourselves a few lies in Canada about our country and our national myth making that I think are all being exposed right now. It's like they say, when the tide goes out, you see, which boats are in good shape and not. And I think one unifying aspect of these subjects that we're bringing up here is we're realizing we used to tell sort of myths about immigration that just, keep it all coming, regardless, all volumes are fine. But at a certain point, if you don't have the infrastructure to support it, it collapses. Likewise with healthcare. We always talk, it's so good we don't have that awful American system. That American system is just terrible. We got to protect the Canadian one at all costs. What are we protecting? The fact that millions of people don't have a family doctor, that you go to the ER and you're waiting for incredible amounts of time, that ERs are shutting down. Mm-hmm. Hospitals are shutting down all across the country. And yet, to your point, Mike, we're putting more money into this than ever before. And then when you talk about foreign affairs in the world stage, the one thing we've been kidding ourselves on is the relevance of our country. Mm-hmm. And I think why we have to get more serious on so many of these things is to try and be a little bit more relevant as well to the world and then to ourselves. Like, Canada is just not a player here. So when Mark Carney says, I'm going to go meet with Zelensky, well, that's desperation. That's like when the guy goes, they don't like my new music, I got to bring out the greatest hits kind of thing. Right. Like, I got, Zelensky, that's a famous guy. Okay, I got to go post for a photo with him.
It made me laugh. I thought Trudeau was the guy who would be the biggest lover of selfies in the history of mankind. But as it turns out, Mark Carney's cut from the same cloth. Cost us $2 billion for that photo, I believe.
All the myths are changing. I don't want to say collapsing. They're changing right now, and I think we're seeing an evolution in the way we're talking about this country. I hope, fingers crossed, for the better.
Yeah. Remember, I keep saying, stay home. Let's stay home for a while. Get our domestic policy cleaned up. Get our budgets. Get our finances in order. And then let's go back out. So when we're a safe, well-defended, accountable country, then we can go back out onto the world stage like we used to, right? And, people saw us as responsible, conservative, and I don't mean conservative in a political perspective, fiscally responsible. And then we go back out onto the world stage. Then we start to have those, showing up and just doling out money for causes which I know they're important causes. I get they're important causes, whatever they be, whatever country they're in. We're not big enough to play in those, quite frankly, and we're not. And the people who immigrate here who are concerned about those causes, Mike, you and I have talked about it time and time again. I know you want to make a statement, which is great, but you can make a statement here all you want. We're not big enough to make an impact. So you might want to save your breath, work really hard, and if you want to send your own money back home to take care of those causes, good for you, right? That's what you believe in, do it. And that's what Canada's about. But quite frankly, as a country, participating in those global events is really futile right now because we don't have the funds to do it.
Yeah. And those people, they're being duped as well, because what the politicians are saying is, okay, we know there's a few ridings with a heavy prevalence of Ukrainian voters. Okay, well, we're going to go pose with Zelensky. We're going to give money to Ukraine, even though we know we're not actually helping resolve something, but it's good to win that little bit. Okay, I'm going to tell this audience a bunch of pro-Israel stuff. I'm going to tell this audience a bunch of pro-Palestinian stuff. I'm going to divide it that way. I know I'm irrelevant on the world stage, but I'm going to do that for domestic consumption reasons. And I also think we kind of know that. But we accept we accept the charade as well.
So we must stop then. That if that's the purpose behind this is, okay, we're all entertaining ourselves here with these notions that we're helping the world just to get votes here domestically. This must stop because we need to take care of ourselves and we need to get proud of ourselves.
It's our own money. We're our own shareholders. So we're all shareholders, whatever nation you're from, if you're a Canadian. So we are actually, that vote is getting them to use that money for the shareholders of Canada. So what are we doing? We're using our own money on conflicts that we're not even part of.
Trudeau said, here we are, sunny ways, I think is what he said. Isn't that what his phrase was? How do you think our new government and Carney greet the world? What's the moniker you think comes out of Parliament this year?
I don't know. I think he's just passing the hat and saying,
so
the cash here.
Please place donation here.
And I think Anthony hit on it earlier, and I was going to chat about it, so good opportunity to do it. Pierre Poilievre, so the opposition leader, and I think it starts there. And my advice going into the session would be take another approach. right? Take another approach. I know, it's funny how the media is goading him a little. Like they're poking him. Oh, you want to get back into the House. You want to go head to head. You want to really go at him. You want to make him just like you did Trudeau. You really want to take him apart, right? Don't take the bait, right? It's about Canada right now. So when you go back, be about Canada, not about the opposition or the prime minister, right? Be about Canada. Be as helpful as possible, but put the debate on the floor. Have that debate. Get the right decision. Make sure you get that accountability and policies. Let's set some targets, right? Let's try to actually agree on a target for GDP growth in the next year. Let's try to do some things that are rational to bring the country back to a firm footing. And I think by doing that, you'll actually help him, which is good, but I also think you'll help yourself and you'll help Canada. And I think that's what we want to try to get to do.
I think Pierre Poilievre needed some humanizing. And that's starting to arrive. We're starting to see more than just the barking dog at the prime minister in question period. I, like you, think that it's time to have a more mature conservative party. And I think that when you do get into that argument state of just fighting every single thing that the government is putting your way, the prime minister is putting in front of you, the credibility is lost in the party. Pick the moments that really matter. Pick the moments that really matter to Canadians that the government is missing and go from there. But I don't think the mission is just to be there opposing everything like we've seen the Conservatives do. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, in Pierre's defense, it's called His Majesty's Loyal Opposition, and it's supposed to be a counterpoint voice where the government says we're doing this, whatever the legislation is, and then the other parliamentarians will poke holes in it to make it better. And then both in the House and in committees in the Senate, you're poking holes in little details and proposing amendments and so on. So I think you should be opposing things as much as possible with a view to improving it, not with a view to destroying things, or to Paul's point, I think just to getting clips out there. Because, there's a saying that they want you to like being opposition leader. If you say, I like being opposition leader, you say, well, that's great.
Good, stay there.
You keep being opposition leader, and I'll keep being prime minister. Right. So you still want to conduct yourself as a prime minister, as the next prime minister, someone with a plan, someone with a thorough approach who can govern, whether it's 5 years from now or 5 months from now.
Makes perfect sense. Well, I mean, it all remains to be told. Everybody weigh in with anything that we've forgotten, because we're going back to school. What are your hopes? Start with Paul and then Anthony. What do you hope for in the first 6 months?
To see a reasonable budget. Really, just point blank. Just want to see something that's reasonable, well thought out, thinks through the pillars of the government, and comes out with a good plan. Anthony?
Easy answer. I'll second that. The banker, the economist guy, the business guy, let's see a budget.
Well, I like to see some a unanimous decision at the table, so I will side with you guys. But I will also encourage anybody watching or listening to send in your comments. Maybe there's something here that we missed that we need to pick up on again. And at the very least, we would love to hear your opinions on what you think will happen in Parliament as we head back this September 15th. I thank you both very much.